The sky above the arena was a dull, grayish blue, the air thick with the scent of dust and anticipation. On the alien planet Vexar, thousands of spectators from across the galaxy had gathered, all eager to witness the event of the century. In the center of the arena, the ground was hard and cracked, an unforgiving stage for what was about to happen. Sarah stood at the edge of the arena, her heart racing. She had been pulled from her spaceship after a routine survey mission gone wrong. Stripped of her weapons and thrown into this place, she had no idea what was coming next. All she knew was that the aliens, these towering, terrifying beings, believed she was no match for their champion. She was only human after all. A loud, deep voice echoed across the arena, drawing Sarah's attention. The Vexarian announcer, a creature with glowing orange eyes and a voice like rolling thunder, spoke to the crowd. Today we witness the ultimate contest of strength. The human, small, fragile, and unarmed, will face our champion. The alien's eyes gleamed with cruel amusement as he motioned toward Sarah. Can she survive the mighty wrath of Zorath, the undefeated champion of Vexar? A hush fell over the crowd as Sarah's heart pounded in her chest. The challenge had been set. She was to face the champion of this alien world, unarmed, with nothing but her bare hands to protect her. Her eyes darted around, searching for any escape, but the arena walls were too high and the gates were locked. There was no way out. The only thing she could do was fight for her life. And yet, despite the overwhelming odds, she couldn't help but feel a flicker of defiance. It was so easy to think that humans were weak, that they couldn't stand up to these powerful creatures. But she wasn't like them. She was stronger than they realized. Sarah took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the thousands of eyes on her. The crowd was silent, watching her every move. She could hear their whispers, their mocking laughter. The aliens believed she was a joke, a toy to be crushed under their champion's fist, but she wouldn't give them the satisfaction. She had been trained to survive. She had been through the worst situations before, and she had always come out stronger. This wasn't the first time she'd been underestimated, and it wouldn't be the last. But today, she was going to show them what humans were truly capable of. A massive roar filled the air, and Sarah's gaze shot forward. There, emerging from the other side of the arena, was Zorath, the champion. He was a mountain of muscle, towering over 7 feet tall, his thick skin a deep shade of violet. His eyes glowed with a fierce, unyielding fire, and his face was twisted in a cruel grin. He cracked his knuckles, the sound like thunder, and his presence alone sent a shiver down Sarah's spine. He was everything Sarah was not. Bigger, stronger, faster. His arms were like tree trunks, and his chest was as wide as a door. He looked unstoppable. But Sarah refused to back down. The crowd cheered wildly as Zorath stepped into the center of the arena. The ground shook beneath his heavy steps. He was confident, arrogant even, and why wouldn't he be? He had never lost a fight in his life. Sarah swallowed her fear. She could feel the fear rising in her chest, but she forced it down. She couldn't afford to be afraid. If she was going to survive this, she had to push everything else aside. The announcer's voice boomed once more. Let the battle begin. Zorath lunged forward, his fists swinging like massive wrecking balls. Sarah's body tensed, her instincts kicking in as she ducked and weaved, narrowly avoiding his crushing blows. The speed and power of the alien were terrifying, but Sarah was quick. She had no choice but to rely on her agility, her small frame, and her ability to move. But with every dodge, her heart raced faster. She could feel the sweat dripping down her forehead, stinging her eyes. Zorath's blows were too close, too strong. The force of them made the air tremble, and every missed hit felt like a near-death experience. But Sarah wasn't going to give up. She had made it this far. She wasn't going to die today. The crowd roared, their voices echoing around the arena. Sarah couldn't focus on them. She couldn't afford to think about how they were laughing, how they were expecting her to fail. She could only think about survival. Zorath roared again, his fists coming down in a deadly arc. This time he aimed for her head. Sarah's heart stopped. This was it, the final blow. There was no way to avoid it. She had to act fast. In that moment, something inside Sarah snapped. A surge of adrenaline flooded her body, and she moved with lightning speed. She ducked under Zorath's punch and darted to the side. The crowd gasped as she slid between his legs, narrowly avoiding the crushing force of his attack. Zorath spun around, his anger obvious now. He wasn't used to being outmaneuvered, and it made him even more dangerous. He roared again, launching himself at Sarah with a series of wild punches. But Sarah wasn't afraid anymore. She was angry. She was tired of being underestimated, tired of being seen as weak. She had the heart of a fighter. She had the heart of humanity. As Zorath swung again, Sarah saw her opening. She wasn't sure where the move came from, but her body acted on instinct. With a speed she didn't know she had, she ducked and launched herself forward, throwing her entire body into the strike. She didn't hit him with fists. No, she hit him with something else. She hit him with her spirit. The impact wasn't enough to knock him out, but it was enough to make him stumble back, throwing off his rhythm. Zorath blinked in surprise, and for a moment the arena fell silent. Sarah stood there panting, her body aching but her spirit unbroken. She had made the first move. She had made him react, and that was enough. The challenge had been set, but Sarah knew this was just the beginning. The real fight had only just started. The humans weren't weak. She was proof of that, and today she would show Zorath and the entire galaxy that a human could fight, unarmed, unafraid. Sarah had just started her fight, and the aliens would soon learn what it meant to underestimate a human. Zorath, the alien champion, wasn't used to being surprised. He had fought countless battles across the galaxy and defeated every opponent sent his way. His reputation was legendary, and the Vexarians had never doubted his strength. To them, he was more than just a champion. He was an unstoppable force, a living legend. His power had broken planets and shattered armies. No one had ever come close to defeating him. Until today. The arena fell silent after Sarah's defiant move. She had dared to stand against him to make him stumble. It was a small thing, just a slip of his balance, a momentary break in his usually perfect rhythm, but it was enough to stir something inside him. Something he hadn't felt in years, doubt. He shook it off, his anger rising. She was only human, he thought. She's nothing compared to me. The crowd began to murmur again, their excitement growing. Some of them were cheering for Sarah, the underdog, while others jeered and laughed, thinking her actions were nothing more than a fluke. Zorath ignored them, his focus narrowing on Sarah as she stood across from him. She was breathing heavily, sweat dripping down her face, but there was fire in her eyes. She wasn't afraid. She wasn't backing down. And that infuriated him. "You've made a mistake, human." Zorath's voice boomed across the arena, deep and menacing. "You think you can stand against me? You're nothing but prey." The words hit Sarah like a physical blow, but she didn't flinch. She had heard worse in her life. And if there was one thing she knew, it was how to push past fear. She couldn't let him break her. The Vexarian champion lunged at her again, his massive fists moving faster than she could track. She dodged the first punch, then the second, but she could feel the wind from each strike brush her skin. Zorath was relentless, each punch a blur of power and fury. He wasn't holding back anymore. He wanted to crush her, to make her regret ever stepping into this arena. Sarah's heart pounded, but she stayed focused. She couldn't afford to make a mistake. She had to keep moving, keep thinking. She wasn't just fighting for herself. She was fighting for every human who had ever been underestimated, for every person who had been told they weren't strong enough. Her eyes darted around, taking in Zorath's every move. She noticed how his massive arms swung wide after each punch, leaving his ribs exposed. There was an opening. It was a small one, but it was enough. As Zorath swung another heavy punch, Sarah moved quickly, sliding under his arm and running toward his side. She didn't waste any time. With a powerful, quick jab, she struck at his ribs. The hit wasn't enough to knock him down, but it caused him to grunt in pain. He spun around, his eyes blazing with fury. "You dare to strike me?" Sarah didn't respond. She couldn't afford to waste energy on words. Instead, she ducked under his next punch and kicked him hard in the knee. The blow sent him stumbling back, but he caught himself quickly, eyes narrowing in anger. The crowd was silent now, no longer sure of what to make of this. A human, small, unarmed, had dared to strike their champion. Some were beginning to murmur in disbelief, others in growing excitement. Could it be possible? Could a human actually defeat Zorath? Zorath was no longer laughing. His eyes burned with rage, his face twisted in a snarl. He charged at Sarah again, faster this time, determined to end it in one brutal blow. But Sarah had seen this before. She had faced tougher opponents in more dangerous situations. She could do this. She waited until the last possible moment. Just as Zorath's massive fist was about to crash into her, she leaped to the side. The punch missed her by inches, and before he could recover, she was already moving. Sarah's small, quick form was her advantage. She ducked, weaved, and dodged every attack, each time coming closer to Zorath's exposed side. She could feel her muscles screaming in protest, but she pushed through it. She couldn't stop now. The alien was slowing down. She could see it in the way he moved, in the desperation in his eyes. Zorath had underestimated her, thought she would crumble under the pressure. But Sarah wasn't just fighting for her life, she was fighting to show everyone that humans were more than what they seemed. They had strength. They had heart. And no matter how many times they were knocked down, they would always rise again. She saw the opening again, the exact same weak spot in his defense. This time she was ready. With a roar of determination, Sarah sprinted forward, her foot striking the ground with all the force she could muster. She dove toward Zorath, aiming for his exposed ribs, her hands reaching out to grab him. In one swift motion, she locked her arms around his torso and used all her body weight to twist. The move wasn't graceful, but it was effective. With a sickening crack, Zorath's side twisted unnaturally, and he screamed in agony. The alien fell to his knees, clutching his broken ribs. His face contorted in pain, but there was no mistaking it. He had been hurt. He was vulnerable. The crowd erupted into chaos, their voices a mixture of shock, disbelief, and awe. No one had ever seen Zorath defeated like this. No one had ever dared to challenge him, and yet a human, had done it. Zorath, struggling to breathe, glared at Sarah, his eyes full of fury. He was still strong, but the pain was clear. For the first time in his life, he was facing someone who wouldn't back down, someone who was willing to fight until the very end. "You should have stayed down," Zorath growled, his voice barely a whisper. But Sarah, standing before him, was stronger than ever. She wiped the sweat from her brow, her chest heaving with every breath. She was exhausted, but she wasn't done. She wasn't going to stop until she had proven that humans could stand up to anything. "You're not the only one who can fight," she said, her voice steady. "I'm not afraid of you, and I'm not going to let you win." The champion looked at her, and for the first time there was a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. The crowd was still roaring, but it was quieter now, as if they too were waiting to see what would happen next. Would Zorath continue his reign of terror, or would this small human, this underdog, be the one to break him? For Sarah, there was only one answer. She was going to win. And nothing, not even the mighty Zorath, was going to stop her. The pain in Sarah's arms was unbearable. Every muscle screamed, every breath felt like a struggle. She could feel the burning in her lungs, the deep exhaustion settling in as Zorath slowly tried to rise. But the feeling of triumph, the undeniable belief that she was not going to let this alien break her, was stronger than the ache in her body. Sarah stood tall, barely able to steady herself on trembling legs, but she wasn't going to show weakness. Not now. She had come too far. The crowd's gasps filled the air, some whispering in shock, others cheering, uncertain about what they were witnessing. Zorath, once proud and unshakable, was now kneeling in front of her, clutching his broken side. His dark eyes, filled with rage, locked onto Sarah. But now there was something else in them, fear. The champion had never faced this before. No one had dared to challenge him in live. His massive fists, his brutal strength, none of it mattered now. The human had managed to slip past it all, landing blow after blow, and in doing so had shattered the myth of his invincibility. Zorath's voice, low and menacing, cut through the silence. "You think you've won, human?" he hissed. His words were thick with disdain, but beneath it there was a hint of something more, something unfamiliar, something he didn't want to admit. "I'm not done yet." Sarah didn't answer. She couldn't waste any more energy on words. She had to focus. She had to finish this. The alien champion might have been injured, but he wasn't done, and she couldn't let him get back up. Zorath staggered to his feet, his breath ragged and shallow. His enormous fists clenched at his sides, and his rage was a palpable force. Sarah watched him closely, waiting for his next move. She had learned something in the brief moments of their battle. The bigger they were, the harder they fell, but they were also slow. She had the speed, the agility to keep moving, to outmaneuver him. Zorath raised his fists high, his muscles straining under the weight of his fury. He charged at her again, slower now, but still powerful. The force behind his swings was enough to break bone, enough to crush a mountain. Sarah's eyes locked onto his every movement, and in those few seconds she saw it, the opening. The weakness. Just a tiny shift in his stance, a slight overreach, a mistake. Sarah's body reacted before her mind even had time to catch up. She dove forward, sliding between his legs, just out of reach of his outstretched fists. Zorath turned around, but Sarah was already there, grabbing hold of his wrist with both hands. The crowd gasped in shock as the human, who had no weapon, who was barely a fraction of the champion's size, gripped his massive wrist with surprising strength. She twisted. Zorath howled in pain as his wrist bent at an unnatural angle. His grip loosened, his massive arm hanging uselessly by his side. The champion staggered back, his knees buckling slightly under the pressure, but he refused to fall. He growled in agony, his alien eyes filled with rage and disbelief. Sarah, breathing heavily, took a step back. She was out of breath. Her arms were shaking, her body sore, but she was winning. She could feel the energy of the crowd surging behind her. It was as if the entire arena was holding its breath, watching this human, this underdog, fight with everything she had. Zorath's eyes narrowed, and for the first time Sarah saw a flicker of respect in them, but it was quickly replaced by fury. He didn't want to admit it, but he was losing, and he didn't know how to stop it. "You're nothing, human," he roared. His voice was filled with a primal rage, and Sarah could see that he was no longer thinking clearly. Every move he made was driven by his frustration, his desperation to prove he wasn't weak. She didn't have time to think about what he said. She had to move. The alien champion lunged again, this time with a fury that made the ground tremble. His fists came down like battering rams, each swing aimed to crush her. But Sarah had learned something important. She didn't need to be faster than him, she just needed to be faster than his rage. Zorath swung wildly, his anger clouding his judgment, and Sarah weaved through the attacks with the precision of someone who had nothing to lose. He was angry, and that made him predictable. Every punch, every swing told her exactly where he was going to strike next. Sarah's heart hammered in her chest as she moved, narrowly avoiding another powerful punch. This time, instead of dodging, she moved in, slipping under his arm and placing herself behind him. She grabbed his arm and twisted with all her might, pulling him off balance. With a sharp, twisting motion, Sarah kicked him in the back of his knee. The alien stumbled, losing his footing. The crowd gasped as he fell forward, his body hitting the ground with a loud crash. For a moment, everything was still. Zorath was on the floor, groaning in pain, and Sarah stood over him, her breath ragged, her body on fire from exhaustion. The crowd was silent. This wasn't supposed to happen. Zorath, the unbeatable champion, was on the ground, and the human was still standing. Sarah took a step back, giving him space to rise, but her gaze never wavered. She had done it. She had taken him down, but she knew better than to think the fight was over. Not yet, not until she finished it. Zorath's chest heaved as he struggled to get up, his body trembling with the pain of his injuries. His pride, however, was intact. It was the only thing still standing. He wasn't going to let this human defeat him, not without a fight. He rose slowly, his muscles bulging, his breath coming in ragged gasps. The anger was still in his eyes, but something else was there now, too. Fear. He was afraid. The crowd was holding its breath, waiting for what would come next. Sarah stood there, ready for whatever was to come, her fists clenched, her heart pounding with the knowledge that she had already won in more ways than one. This fight wasn't just for her survival anymore. It was for every human who had ever been told they were weak. It was for every soul who had been underestimated, crushed, and overlooked. And with that, Sarah knew one thing for sure. She was going to win, no matter what. The champion was down, but Sarah wasn't finished yet. She had one more thing to prove. The arena was still, the crowd unsure of what they were witnessing. No one had ever seen Zorath, the invincible Vexarian champion, brought to his knees like this. The alien's massive form lay sprawled on the ground, breathing heavily, his body trembling with pain. His pride, once unshakable, had been fractured. But despite the overwhelming odds against him, Zorath wasn't defeated. Not yet. Sarah stood over him, her chest rising and falling with each labored breath. Sweat stung her eyes, but her gaze remained locked on the fallen champion. She could feel the weight of the arena's eyes on her. The Vexarians were waiting, unsure whether to cheer or jeer. They had never seen a human last this long. They had never seen anyone stand up to Zorath like this before. The crowd had started to murmur. Some had begun to cheer for Sarah. They were amazed, stunned, unsure of what to make of the spectacle they had just witnessed. Others, however, still couldn't believe what they were seeing. To them, Zorath was more than a champion. He was a legend. And legends didn't fall, not like this. Sarah knew, though, that she was still standing because of one thing, her refusal to give up. She had faced fear, had faced her own doubt, and she had pushed through it. And now, she was staring down the alien champion, the one who had been built up as undefeatable. Zorath pushed himself up, his muscles trembling with each movement, his face a mask of anger and disbelief. He glared at Sarah, his eyes full of fury. "You should have stayed down," he growled, his voice thick with pain. He was on one knee now, his body barely able to hold his massive frame upright. Sarah said nothing. She had no time for words. Instead, she took a step back, giving him space to rise. Her body ached, her muscles were screaming in pain, but she stood tall. This fight wasn't over, not yet. Zorath struggled to his feet, his large form swaying slightly. He staggered forward, his massive fists raised in front of him. His eyes were wild with rage. This time his movements were less controlled. Every swing was more desperate, more forceful. He was swinging blindly, the frustration building in him with each failed strike. Sarah had been expecting this. He was angry now, losing his cool, and when someone like Zorath lost their calm, they became reckless. That was her chance. She dodged his first swing, feeling the wind from his fist brush her cheek. With quick reflexes, she ducked under the second punch, narrowly avoiding the alien's grasping hands. Zorath roared in frustration and swung again, faster this time, but Sarah had already anticipated it. She sidestepped to the left, his fist missing her by inches. The crowd gasped. The champion's power was undeniable, but now he was off balance. The human was moving too fast for him to keep up. Sarah's movements were a blur, her body moving with precision, each dodge a step closer to victory. Zorath's anger grew with every failed attack. His massive fists came down harder, faster, but Sarah kept moving. She was wearing him down, piece by piece. And when Zorath overextended again, Sarah saw it, a small opening, a fraction of a second where she could strike. Without thinking, she surged forward, planting her feet firmly on the ground. She dove in low, twisting her body just as Zorath brought his fist down in a wild swing. Sarah's hands grabbed his wrist with everything she had, and in a single, powerful motion, she twisted, pulling his arm out of its socket. Zorath cried out in agony as his arm jerked, his body lurching forward. The alien's massive body was thrown off balance, and for the first time in this fight, Zorath stumbled. He collapsed to the ground once more, his chest heaving as he gasped for air. His arm hung limply by his side, and for the briefest moment he looked vulnerable, human. Sarah stood over him again, her body aching but her spirit unbroken. The roar of the crowd echoed around the arena. They had never seen anything like this before. They had never seen a human fight like this. Zorath, struggling to rise again, glared at her through his pain. His eyes burned with fury and disbelief. This was not how it was supposed to be. Humans were weak. They were meant to cower in fear, to fall before his might. He had never faced anything like this. He had never faced her. "You don't know when to quit, do you?" he sneered, his voice full of contempt. But this time there was something different in his voice, a hint of fear, a tremor in his tone that wasn't there before. Sarah didn't answer. She couldn't waste her energy on his words. She was focused on the fight, on the goal, and that goal was within reach. Zorath lunged at her again, his injured arm swinging weakly at her. But Sarah was quicker, her movements flowing with an ease that seemed almost effortless. With one fluid motion, she ducked, swept his feet out from under him, and sent him crashing to the ground once more. The roar of the crowd was deafening, and for the first time, Sarah allowed herself a breath of relief. But it wasn't over, not yet. Zorath, though badly injured, was still trying to rise. His pride, his desire to win, kept him going, but Sarah knew he was fatting. His attacks were slower now, weaker. He was out of breath, his body starting to fail him. She watched him carefully, her eyes scanning for another opening. She knew she had to act quickly. If she gave him time to recover, he would strike back with everything he had left. But she wasn't afraid. She had already come this far. Zorath, with a final roar, lunged once more, his feet dragging as he tried to make one last attempt to overpower her. But Sarah was ready. With every ounce of strength left in her, Sarah jumped forward, grabbing his shoulders and using his momentum against him. She twisted his body in a powerful move, throwing all her weight into the motion. Zorath's body crashed to the ground once more, and this time he didn't move. Silence fell over the arena. The champion was defeated. Sarah stood over him, panting, her body exhausted, but her eyes never left the fallen alien. The crowd stared in stunned silence, unable to process what had just happened. Zorath, the undefeated champion, lay at her feet, his body broken, his pride shattered. For a moment there was nothing but stillness. Then a single cheer broke through the silence. Slowly more followed until the entire arena was roaring with disbelief, awe, and admiration. The human had done it. Against all odds, against a creature far stronger, far faster, and far more powerful than her, Sarah had won. And in that moment, Sarah knew one thing for sure. Humans were capable of anything. The arena was bathed in silence, a heavy, electric kind of stillness that seemed to press down on Sarah's chest. The crowd had gone quiet, their eyes fixed on her, the human who had just defeated the invincible champion of Vexar. Zorath, once the towering, mighty figure feared across the galaxy, lay broken on the arena floor. His chest rose and fell with slow, labored breaths. The alien's massive frame was still, and his eyes, which had once burned with unrelenting rage, were now clouded with pain and disbelief. His arm was hanging at a strange angle, his ribs cracked, his pride shattered. For a long moment, there was only the sound of Sarah's own breath, shaky and uneven. Her heart was still pounding, her body trembling from exhaustion, but beneath it all there was something else, something more powerful than the fear she had carried into this fight. Triumph. She had done it, she had defeated him, she had defied the impossible. The alien champion had fallen, and Sarah stood victorious. But as the silence stretched on, she could feel the weight of the crowd's eyes on her. Some watched in shock, some in awe, while others looked almost afraid. The humans, the ones who had been dismissed as weak, as nothing compared to the alien forces, had just proven something that would echo across the galaxy. Sarah's gaze remained on Zorath, her face still grim. The alien's heavy breaths filled the air, and for a second she thought he might get up again. But he didn't. He could barely lift his head. You've beaten me?" Zorath's voice was hoarse, barely a whisper. His eyes, full of bitterness, locked onto hers, but there was something else there now. A kind of respect mingled with the shame of being humbled. The champion of Vexar, the one who had crushed enemies without mercy, was now at the mercy of a human. Sarah didn't respond right away. She didn't need to. Words wouldn't fix this. Her actions had already spoken louder than anything she could say. She took a slow step backward, her legs unsteady but determined. She couldn't show weakness now, not in front of them. She had faced this moment. She had faced her fear. The alien was still breathing, his body in ruins, but there was one final thing Sarah needed to do. She couldn't just stand there. Not when her survival had come at such a cost. She had to show them all. With her heart pounding, she turned toward the crowd, who were still waiting, still holding their breath. Sarah raised her head high, her chest rising and falling in the wake of the battle. She was exhausted, her muscles aching, her body bruised, and her skin raw from the fight. But there was something in her eyes that no one could deny. She had survived. "You see," Sarah's voice rang out clear and strong across the arena. "We fight with everything we have, no matter what." Her words were simple, but they carried weight. The crowd was silent, unsure of how to react. The alien species, who had mocked humans for centuries, who had believed that their strength alone made them superior, were now being forced to reckon with the truth. "We might not have your strength, or your size, or your power," Sarah continued, her eyes sweeping across the sea of faces, "but we have something you'll never understand." She paused, her gaze settling back on Zorath, who was still lying broken on the ground. "We have heart." The crowd, still uncertain, was beginning to stir. Murmurs filled the air, the weight of Sarah's words sinking in. The aliens, who had believed their champion's power was unbeatable, were now forced to confront the truth that had been in front of them the whole time. Humans didn't need to be the strongest or the biggest. They had something else. They had the will to fight, to keep going when everything seemed impossible. The arena seemed to tremble. Some of the aliens who had once mocked Sarah were now shifting uncomfortably. The energy in the air was changing, the weight of the moment settling in. Sarah had done something no one thought possible. She had won. But the silence didn't last long. A low rumble started to grow among the crowd. It was hesitant at first, a few voices breaking the stillness. Then slowly it built. More and more voices joined in until the arena was filled with an eruption of sound, cheers, chants, and claps of admiration. The crowd, once so certain of Zorath's victory, was now acknowledging something else. They were seeing a human in a way they had never seen before. Sarah felt a rush of emotions hit her. Relief, disbelief, exhaustion, but also pride. She had fought against everything that had been thrown at her, against a creature far stronger than she could ever hope to be, against the belief that she didn't belong in that arena at all, and she had won. The Vexarians, once mocking her, were now rising to their feet, some bowing their heads in a show of respect. The cheers were deafening, filling the arena with the kind of energy that came with a true underdog story. And Sarah stood there, breathing heavily, her body sore, but her heart swelling with a sense of victory she could never fully put into words. She had done more than survive. She had proven that humans were not to be underestimated. Zorath, his pride broken, slowly pushed himself to his knees. His eyes, still filled with bitterness, met hers once more. For the first time in this entire fight, there was no malice, no arrogance. There was only a quiet understanding. "You've earned your place here, human," Zorath muttered, his voice thick with defeat. It was the closest thing to respect he had ever given anyone. Sarah didn't need more than that. She didn't need to hear Zorath admit defeat because she already knew. The fight had already been won. "This isn't just about winning," Sarah's voice cut through the noise. "It's about showing you all that no matter what you think of us, we will never stop fighting." She turned to the crowd one last time, her face hard but full of conviction. "We may be small, but we are stronger than you could ever imagine." The roar of the crowd was deafening. The sound of humanity's victory echoed across the arena. The roar of the crowd was deafening. It echoed through the massive arena, vibrating the ground beneath Sarah's feet. It wasn't just applause, this was respect. The same crowd that had jeered and laughed at her when she first stepped into the arena now stood in awe. They had seen the impossible, and they had witnessed a human, small and fragile, stand tall and defeat their strongest champion. Sarah's heart was still pounding in her chest, her body trembling with exhaustion. She had fought with everything she had, and she had won. But even now, as the crowd's cheers filled the air, there was something else. A strange weight in her chest, a feeling of finality. Zorath, the mighty champion, was on the ground, his body defeated, his pride broken. His massive form lay there, crumpled and weakened. He wasn't dead. He was still breathing, still alive, but his once mighty presence had been crushed. Sarah had done it. She had taken him down. But even now, she couldn't shake the feeling that the victory was bittersweet. The silence that followed the roar of the crowd was heavy. The arena, once filled with chaos and the sound of battle, had calmed into an eerie quiet. Sarah could feel the eyes of the galaxy on her, even though she was just a single human standing alone in a place where no one had thought she belonged. She had won, but at what cost? Sarah's knees buckled and she collapsed to the ground. Her body was spent. Every muscle ached, and the adrenaline that had kept her moving through the fight was starting to fade. Her arms felt like lead and her head swam with dizziness. But she couldn't let herself fall completely. Not yet. "You did it!" A voice broke through the noise, soft and yet somehow cutting through the air like a blade. Sarah turned her head, her eyes blurry with exhaustion. She saw Maya, her fellow crew member who had been watching from the sidelines, standing in the shadows at the edge of the arena. Maya was grinning, her eyes full of pride and disbelief. Sarah managed a weak smile. "I can't believe I did it." Maya stepped forward, her face lighting up with excitement. She had been the one who had kept Sarah's hope alive after their capture. It was Maya who had whispered words of encouragement during those dark moments, reminding her that she was stronger than she thought. And now, Maya was here, watching her stand victorious. "You proved them wrong, Sarah. You showed them what humans are really made of." Maya's voice trembled, and Sarah could see the tears glistening in her eyes. Sarah nodded, but the feeling of victory wasn't quite what she had expected. There was no rush of joy, no sense of conquering the world. Instead, there was a strange emptiness. She had fought and won, but it felt like something inside her had shifted. She had been pushed to her breaking point and had emerged victorious, yes, but she couldn't ignore the toll it had taken on her. The alien champions, the Vexarians, slowly made their way to the center of the arena, their eyes filled with quiet awe. Sarah's victory was no longer a mockery. It was a truth they had no choice but to face. They had believed their strength was unmatched, that no one could defeat them. But here she was, the living proof that their arrogance had been their downfall. One of the Vexarian leaders, a tall, silver-skinned alien, stepped forward. His eyes were wide with disbelief as he approached Sarah. For the first time, he seemed to hesitate, unsure of what to say. "You have done something that no one thought possible." His voice was deep, and it carried an undeniable weight. "You have defeated Zorath, and for that He paused, clearly trying to find the right words. "We acknowledge your strength." Sarah looked at him, her body still trembling, but her mind sharper than ever. She knew what this meant. The Vexarians had never acknowledged anyone outside of their own race as worthy, but here they were, acknowledging her. Her, the human who had been cast aside, the one they thought was nothing but a weakling. But she wasn't weak. She had shown them that, and now, for the first time, they saw it too. The leader stepped aside, and another figure approached, Zorath. His body was broken, his pride shattered, but there was a strange, quiet acceptance in his eyes now. He had been defeated, but there was no denying the respect he held for the human who had bested him. Zorath's voice, hoarse and full of pain, broke the silence. "I have lost." The words were heavy, like they had taken everything he had left to say. "You have proven yourself stronger than I thought." Sarah didn't know how to respond. There was no grand victory speech, no grand moment of glory. Zorath's defeat didn't feel like a triumph. It felt like the end of something she couldn't quite grasp. Instead of speaking, she simply nodded. She had no need for more words. She had shown herself, that she was more than what they believed. She had beaten their champion, and now she stood on the edge of something new. Zorath slowly and painfully stood to his feet. He raised his uninjured arm in a gesture that Sarah recognized. It was the universal symbol of respect. It was rare for an alien of his stature to show such a gesture, especially to a human. But now there was no denying it. The crowd was silent again, unsure of what would happen next. Sarah watched Zorath, the alien who had once seemed invincible, now standing before her, broken, humbled. "You are not what I expected, human," Zorath muttered. "You are stronger than you look." Sarah's lips parted slightly, and for the first time she found herself at a loss for words. She had fought for her life, fought to show the Vexarians that humans had heart, had strength, and had the will to win against all odds. But now, standing here, she realized that this victory wasn't just hers. It was for everyone who had ever been told they were weak, for everyone who had ever been counted out. "Thank you," Sarah said quietly, her voice strong, yet filled with a deep, quiet emotion. She didn't need to say more, they all understood. The Vexarians bowed their heads, acknowledging her strength, her victory, and the humanity she represented. And in that moment, Sarah understood something deeply important. She wasn't just fighting for herself. She was fighting for every person who had ever been told they couldn't make a difference, who had ever been told they weren't strong enough. She had proven them wrong, and she had done it for everyone. The roar of the crowd returned. This time it was louder, stronger, filled with respect and admiration. Sarah stood in the center of the arena, not just as a survivor, but as a symbol of human strength. And for the first time, Sarah allowed herself to smile. She had done it. She had won, and nothing would ever be the same again. Sarah had won, and she would never be forgotten. The roar of the crowd was deafening, filling the massive arena with a sound Sarah had never imagined would be directed at her. It was as if the walls of the arena themselves were shaking under the weight of the thousands of voices now celebrating her victory. But even as the noise filled her ears, Sarah couldn't quite believe what had just happened. She had done it. She had defeated Zorath, the unassailable champion of Vexar, and now the galaxy was witnessing a moment that would change everything. Sarah stood at the center of the arena, her body bruised and battered, but her spirit unbroken. Her hands were trembling, her limbs sore from the intensity of the battle, but she was standing. She was still standing, and in that moment she felt more alive than she ever had before. The alien champion, once towering and invincible, now lay sprawled on the ground behind her. His massive form was still, but his chest rose and fell with shallow breaths, his broken body a testament to the fight that had just taken place. The arena was filled with Vexarians, aliens of all shapes and sizes, who had come to witness the spectacle, but now they were witnessing something even more incredible, a human standing victorious in an arena meant for giants. Sarah's heart was pounding in her chest, her breath still coming in sharp gasps, but she couldn't shake the feeling of disbelief. She had faced Zorath head-on, a creature far stronger, faster, and more powerful than she could ever hope to be, and she had won. No one had expected it. No one had thought it possible, yet here she was, proving them all wrong. The crowd was still chanting her name, their voices swelling with admiration and respect. For the first time in her life, Sarah felt like she wasn't just a number, a pawn in someone else's game. She was a fighter. She was a survivor. She was human, and that was enough. But even as she stood there, soaking in the moment, a part of her couldn't help but think about how far she had come. From the moment she had been thrown into this arena, she had been terrified. The odds had seemed impossible. The alien champion had been unbeatable, a force of nature that no one had ever dared to defy. But Sarah had stood her ground. She had fought with everything she had. And in the end, it was that will, the unshakable will to survive, that had carried her to victory. Zorath was still struggling to rise from the floor, his body heavy with pain, his pride shattered. His once confident glare was now replaced with something more subdued, more uncertain. As he tried to push himself up, Sarah saw the exhaustion in his eyes. For the first time, he seemed vulnerable. He had been broken, not just physically, but emotionally as well. His reputation as an undefeated champion had been shattered, and there was no denying it now. The human had beaten him. "You have won, human," Zorath grunted, his voice rough and ragged. He struggled to push himself to his knees, but the pain in his body was too much. He slumped forward, barely able to keep his head up. I underestimated you." Sarah stood still, her heart heavy with the weight of the moment. She had expected anger, hatred, maybe even rage from Zorath, but what she got was something different. His voice was thick with defeat, but there was an edge of something else in it, a kind of reluctant admiration. Zorath had never thought a human could do this, could take him down in a fair fight, but she had. "You were stronger than I thought," Zorath continued, his voice low, almost humbled. "I never imagined a human could do this." For a moment, Sarah didn't know how to respond. She had spent so much of her life fighting just to survive, just to prove she wasn't weak. She had never expected to be standing in front of a champion like Zorath, who was now humbled by her. She had fought to prove herself, to show that humans were more than just fragile beings. But now that she had done it, now that she had won, the victory didn't feel as sweet as she had imagined. "It's not just about strength, Zorath," Sarah said quietly, her voice steady but full of emotion. "It's about heart, about not giving up when everything is against you. That's what makes humans different." Zorath looked at her, his eyes filled with something she hadn't expected, respect. There was no malice in his gaze now, no anger, only a quiet understanding. For the first time, he saw the true strength of a human. It wasn't in their size or their power, but in their will to keep going, no matter what. "You've proven that," Zorath muttered. "I can't deny it. You've earned my respect, human." With those words, something changed. The crowd, who had once been silent in disbelief, erupted into applause. The Vexarians, the ones who had mocked and laughed at Sarah, were now showing her the respect she had earned. The roar of the crowd was louder now, not just in admiration for her victory, but in acknowledgement of what she had accomplished. She had changed their perception of humans. She had shattered their arrogance and shown them the strength of the human spirit. Sarah stood there, her heart swelling with emotion. She had done it. She had shown them all that humans were capable of anything. But more than that, she had proven to herself that no matter how small or fragile one might seem, resilience was the greatest strength of all. As Zorath was helped to his feet by his fellow Vexarians, Sarah took a step back, allowing him space. She didn't need to gloat. She didn't need to boast. She had already won. The battle, the fight, and the respect were all hers. She had shown them what humanity was made of. The Vexarian leader who had spoken earlier stepped forward again, his voice calm but filled with authority. "We have witnessed your strength, human. We will not forget this. You have earned your place among us." Sarah nodded, the weight of his words sinking in. She had fought not just for her survival, but for the future of humanity. She had fought for every person who had ever been told they weren't strong enough, for every person who had ever been made to feel small. And in that moment, Sarah realized that this victory wasn't just hers. It was for all of them, for everyone who had ever been underestimated, pushed aside, or ignored. "Thank you," she whispered to herself, more in gratitude than in triumph. She didn't need the galaxy to applaud her. She had already done what she set out to do. She had shown them all the strength of the human spirit. And as the crowd continued to roar in her honor, Sarah allowed herself one last breath, a moment of peace. She had won, and nothing would ever be the same again.